Good.
Okay. Okay, again, Shabbat Shalom, Mishpachah. We're about to go ahead and get started with the lesson. And the title of today's show is going to be called The Levirate Marriage. All right? The Levirate Marriage. It is also called in Hebrew, this word levirate is the Hebrew word Yabam. Now, before we get started, I don't need, Maisha, she don't need to comment. Sister Simone, not Simone, but Coach Nina, she don't need to bring out any information on this because they should be already familiar with this. But is anybody familiar with the Levirate marriage? Okay, we're going to talk about that today. Maisha, she brought it to my attention, but I wasn't familiar with the word, but with the definition. And today's lesson, we're going to show that you do know what the word means because we talked about it last week, but we only went to it by definition. And just to give you a quick breakdown of this word here, it's spelled L-E-V-I-R-A-T-E, all right? And a lot of times people might get it confused and say, being that you see the word Levi in the word, that is part of the Levitical law, but it's not. It has nothing to do with the Levitical law at all. And actually, like I talked about before, Hebrew is going to be very, very important. And so, again, I need some of your input. What were some of the things that you've learned through the conference call last week regarding the Levirate law?
Some of the things when I listened was interesting, far as kinsmen. So there were two examples with Ruth being married to the next of kin.
Right.
Versus if we talked about it, your widow and your brother died, you go to the brother-in-law. Some of it I think wasn't clear. It was being all put together.
Right.
That was some of my questions, like where's the scriptures for the kinsman versus the brother-in-law?
Right.
What does that mean? Then lines between, we talked about adultery and polygyny.
Right.
And I think some of the sisters just had some examples or experience where brothers told them, it's okay, I can get any wife, anytime. It wasn't clear what four situations or examples or scenarios a husband or a man would get another wife. So some of that wasn't clear.
Okay, and we're going to tackle all of that today, and I just want to make sure everything was clear because the brother back in the back here, you brought out some good points, all right? I just wanted to make sure that we have everything clear because a lot of times what I'm noticing is that when I begin to say things, I'm taking for granted that a lot of people might already know where I'm coming from. And so what I decided to do is kind of slow it down a little bit and make sure that everybody's on the same page because the Hebrew, again, is going to be very important.
But after the conference, because I need to know this, did you understand after the conference?
Oh, we're going to do it today. We're going to get it done today. Because
no, I still need to know because I need to assess what's going on.
Because what's going to happen now is that, being that I said that this word is actually, this word is Latin, and the definition that they're giving regarding marriage is limited. It's very, very limited. And that's the reason why I'm a strong advocate now of Hebrew. Because when you look at the word Yabam, okay, which is making a reference to this word here, in Hebrew, it's a little bit different, but a lot different. So my point that I'm going to be making today is that regarding marriage and the way that we're accustomed to marriage, based upon Hebrew marriage, is totally different. I mean, totally different. It's like night and day. And this causes a lot of problem in marriages. And this is the reason why I asked a very important question last week. I'm going to go over the question again. I asked now, is there anything in the Tanakh, and I broke down the acronyms, the T, the N, and the K. The Torah represents the Nevi'im, which is the prophets. Excuse me, the writings, and the Ketuvim is now the prophets, the writings and the prophets. And I said, now, is there anything in the Tanakh that will prevent you from committing to a full relationship with the Father of Yahuwah? My sister, she brought out a very good point. In order for you to commit, for the most part, you need to know what it is that you're getting yourself involved with in order for you to make that ultimate commitment. Because the Torah is very, very important. The Father wants us now to have this unity, this love relationship back with Him again. My sister here, she brought out a real good point, and I admire her for that. She said that, well, basically, she haven't read the whole scripture. You haven't read everything in the scriptures yet, right? And so, but I was like, wow, that is a beautiful thing because you still want to commit yourself to the Torah. And this is what the Father was trying to do from the very beginning. You needed to act on faith. And the thing that came to mind when you said that was the first scripture I wanted to go to was the book of Devarim. The book of Devarim, the 5th chapter, verse 24. 5:24. And this is the reason why I admire what you said regarding your stance, even though you never read all of the scriptures and you're acting on faith. Devarim 5, verse 24. 5:24. You know what? Somebody read that for me.
And ye say, Behold, Yahuwah Elohim has shown us his esteem, and we have heard his voice out of the midst of the fire. This day we have seen that Elohim shall speak to man, and he shall live.
Hallelujah. Now verse 28.
And Yahuwah heard the voice of your words, as ye spoke to me. And Yahuwah said to me, I have heard the voice of the words of this people, even all the things that they have said to thee. They have well said all that they have spoken.
And it is good? That's what you have?
Yeah.
You don't know? Okay. And again, I admire your response so much is that, do you know who's speaking, who's actually speaking here? In verse 5:24? Okay, we're going to go ahead and get to the nitty-gritty with this. Verse 24. And you said, Behold, has shown us Yahuwah our Elohim olive-tav. See, this is going to be the key. When we look at the scriptures, in our King James versions and what other versions that you might have, the Hebrew is so important where there's a lot of things that's missing. This symbol here, can you still see this? Am I right in here? Am I right, the olive-tav?
Yeah, you good.
Okay. That symbol there is so important because we had talked about a couple of weeks ago that that symbol is in the book of Genesis alone. Just in the book of Genesis now, over 800 times. And this olive-tav symbol, according to, like I've been saying for the last couple of weeks now, they look at it as no more than as a direct object pointer. Or they might say, you know what, it's an untranslated particle. But when you begin to look at the scriptures from a Hebraic perspective, this is actually now the sign of the covenant. When we begin to look at now from the Hebrew pictographs, the olive represents something and the tav represents something. So we have the beginning and the end. We went to the book of Revelation, the 1st chapter, verse 8, where the Messiah actually said, I am the beginning and the end. Mm-hmm. But it has now in Romans, the 1st chapter, it said, I'm Alpha and Omega. And we talked about how the word Alpha is the Greek. In Greek, it means the first, and Omega is the last letter of the Greek alphabet, and it means, it's like who would represent the tav. So I said that I believe that the Messiah was actually speaking to Yehukanan on the Island of Patmos in Hebrew, and he said actually that I am the olive-tav. And you can go to the book of John, the 1st chapter, verse 1 and 8, to also show you that this olive-tav symbol is very important. So again, the reason why I'm bringing out 5:24 in reference to what the sister made her great statement about, she's going to still continue to walk in this walk through faith, is that, again, in verse 24 it says, and you said, Behold, has shown us Yahuwah, our Elohim, and then it has olive-tav, his esteem or glory, olive-tav, and his greatness, olive-tav, and his voice. We have heard out of the midst of the fire. We have seen this day that Elohim, olive-tav, does speak with man, and he do live. Then verse 28 it says, Elohim says, olive-tav, you speak to us, olive-tav, all that Yahuwah, our Elohim, speaks to you, and we will hear it and do it. So, excuse me, that was verse 27. Verse 28. This is how many olive-tavs that are in these scripts here that people are just running over. And with Hebrew now, you can't run over anything. Every single word means something. So again, when you see this olive-tav symbol here, and we begin to talk about the blood that the Messiah told us to put over the doorpost, that blood now is acting as a covering or a seal for the nation of Yashra'al. Later on in the script, we're going to be able to find now, we're not going to do it today, is that the mark that the Father is trying to put on you, okay, is this olive-tav symbol here. You're going to find now in Scripture now, wherever, well, in certain places now, you're going to see now the children of Yashra'al, and attached to the word children of Yashra'al, you're going to see this symbol here, olive-tav. So when we read now Deuteronomy, the 5th chapter, verse 24, and then 5:28, the way that that is actually saying now is that the children of Israel saw Yahuwah's esteem. You heard Yahuwah Elohim's voice. You seen his greatness. He's referring to now what happened at Mount Sinai. And that's where the wedding took place. So I'm just trying to make sure that everybody understands the whole thing, that what happened at Mount Sinai, that was a marriage. This olive-tav symbol again is going to be very important, because once the contract was sealed, remember how, I go to the scriptures if we need to, I just want to keep things kind of moving kind of quick here. Remember now, when the consummation was made, the marriage was made, Moses took blood, he took some hyssop and he sprinkled it on the people, and then he sprinkled it now on the Torah. Let you know that this is a blood covenant. All right, a blood covenant, meaning that you're bound to follow these laws, statutes, commandments to the end. And this is the reason why this olive-tav symbol is so important. It's an indicator that this is referring to the Messiah, and this is the reason why we went from a student to Talmud to Talmidah. We talked about the relationship with Torah, and when we begin to master these levels should always bring you front and center back to the Messiah. How the Father again is using the olive-tav. That olive-tav again is referring to Yahushua HaMashiach. All right. Now, again, I just want to make sure that everybody understands what's going on. Does anybody here have any problems or any issues with committing to the Messiah here, to this walk of Torah? This will be very, very important, because heaven and earth is going to be this witness against you regarding this this covenant here. Now, another thing I wanted to talk about too here is that, now let's go over to the lesson, all right? We're going to go over to the lesson here. And one of the first accounts of this Levirate marriage is, we're going to talk about Naomi a little bit. When we go to the book of Ruth, we know that Naomi, her husband, and her 2 sons had left Bethlehem. The word Bethlehem means the house of bread, and have moved in search of food to a Moabite country, where both boys, all right, married local girls. Okay, tragedy struck, and Naomi's husband and 2 sons died. Naomi, after the situation where her husband dies, all right, her 2 sons die, and she's about to leave, she changes her name to Mara, M-A-R-A, and it means bitterness. Naomi was naturally quite depressed at these turns of events. Hearing that the famine was over, she decided to return home to Bethlehem. Not wishing to impose on her daughter-in-laws, she suggested that they stay behind and find new husbands, all right, new husbands. But only one did. The other, Ruth, refused. She insisted on staying with her mother-in-law. And she showed how Ruth looked after Naomi and Elohim looked after Ruth. Although Ruth was a Moabite, Ruth insisted, okay, she insisted on doing all the things that would have been expected of a Yahudim girl. While young people tended now to marry within the village, that's going to be very important. While young people tended to marry within the village, with a bride could continue contract with her birth family, it was clear that the girl moved to her husband's home. That's going to be very important. It was clear that the girl moved to her husband's home and not the other way around. So we had talked about a couple of weeks ago the importance of this letter here. Okay? In classical Hebrew, we have a bait. We talked about how that bait is the first letter in the Hebrew Bible, but in the Hebrew alphabet we have the aleph. We talked about that. We talked about how you put those 2 words together. You have Ab, which is the father. The reason why in a marriage the groom takes the bride out of the house, because as long as the bride is in her father's house, she's under her father's covering, right? So it is important for now the groom, the potential groom now, to take the bride from the father's house. And we see now prophetic shadow pictures of that, and reality now when the Messiah or the Father had to now take his bride out of bondage, okay, because she was under somebody's authority. And so in order for us now to have this marital contract, he needed to take the bride out of Egypt, bring her to Mount Sinai, where now they can have this intimate relationship regarding a marriage. All right, so again, while young people tended to marry within the village where the bride could continue contact with her birth family, it was clear that the girl moved to her husband's home and not the other way around. Her loyalties were expected to transfer to a new family and home of that of her husband. So again, it is very important for us to understand who runs and heads the house. The leader of the house is the man, the ish. So it is his responsibility to make sure that this house is provided, just like you had talked about earlier. All right, so there's rules and regulations to marriage. Now, when Naomi decided to go back to Bethlehem, Ruth insisted on going too. As a good Yahudim girl, her place was with her mother-in-law, not with her birth family. So we see what's going on here, right? When a woman gets married to her ish, she is now responsible, and she's now under authority of her husband. Her family now is basically now her husband's family. She leaves her family, and now she's in contact now, basically now, with her husband's family. And that's going to mean a whole lot in the end, because the scriptures is trying to make sure that you're also protected in the end. Because there's a lot of teachings now that say, well, listen, the scriptures are biased, and there's nothing affordable for women. Women are second-class citizens, but we're going to show in scriptures that that's not the case. And that's the reason why now, when we understand Hebrew culture, when you marry your husband, all right, you're now under his authority, and his family now is the protector of you. So if anything was to happen to you, to him now, it is his family's responsibility now to also make sure that you're taken care of. Nobody loses out here. Now, we're going to show all this in scripture. Now, everywhere in the ancient world, this little research here, everywhere in the ancient world, widows were, being a widow now was a serious disadvantage to other groups. The poor in Israel had two sources of help when we begin to look at the story of Ruth. They had the right to glean, that is, they had the right at harvest time to follow the reapers and gather any grain that was missed, and landowners were expected to ensure that something was left for gleaning. Meaning this, like I had said when I first started here, is that the festivals of Yahuwah is the Father's salvation plan, where everybody gets the chance to eat. But again, the Father wants to make sure that you're well taken care of. If something was to happen to the Ish, you're now a widow. So the question now becomes, what happens to you? You're poor. Because he was the main provider of the household. So these are questions that we need to ask. Because what I'm going to show here today is that the nation of Yashra'al was a full functioning body. We was a government. Everybody had everything in order. Nobody was left out. And that's what we want to try to explain here today. So again, when we begin to look at the festivals of Yahuwah, it tells us now not to glean the fields. And the reason why you don't glean the fields, again, is so that the poor can eat. We have a situation now in the book of John where there was a Canaanite woman. She comes to the Messiah, and the daughter is sick, and the woman says, listen, you know what? No, the Messiah says, I'm only sent but to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. The Talmudim of the Messiah saw this conversation happening with this Canaanite woman. They wanted to shove her to the side. Now the Canaanite woman said something very important. She said, even the dogs eat from the crumbs of the master's table. So the crumbs are now the actual leftovers of what you eat. So everybody gets a chance to eat. And we see now what's going on in Ruth, in the book of Ruth now. Ruth is actually gleaning. She's gleaning. Now that's a whole other story there when we begin to look at how Ruth was actually moving in the story of Ruth, because some people are saying that Ruth was an Israelite. All right, but we can show now through the festivals of Yahuwah that she was not an Israelite. Now, again, to make sure that the widows were also taken care of now, They had the right to glean, that is, they had the right at harvest time to follow the reapers and gather any grain that was missed, and landowners now, this is very important now, landowners were expected to ensure that something was left for gleaning. The poor had the right to expect help from kin who were better off, all right? So kinship was very important. And this is the reason why you said y'all talked about last week the Levirate law of marriage. But this word here, Yabam, is going to explain this a whole lot better than what we have with the Levirate law of marriage. Now remember, now Boaz was the owner of a particular field which Ruth gleaned. And Ruth insisted that, but Boaz insisted that his workers leave a reasonable portion of the harvest for all the gleaners. When he heard of the plight of his kin, Naomi and Ruth, he provided them with additional support. Now, dying without a son, both his name and his life was considered by Hebrews a particular terrible tragedy. So children was very, very important. The way that we do it here in Western society here is that, you know what, I don't want to have any children. All right? We're granted rights here in Western society that you even have the right to abort your children. Okay, so there's a lot of things that's going on in Western society that we need to get rid of and come back to the Hebraic walk of Torah. All right? Now, it gets very, very touchy as we're going to continue on with the service here, because this Levirate law is based upon women looking out for their fellow sisters here. There's absolutely no way in the world you can go over the Levirate law and not talk about polygyny. It's not going to happen. Concubines and handmaidens, these things were there in the scripture, but what's happening now is that a lot of people like to kind of shy away from it because of what they've been taught here in Western society. And one of the reasons why the scripture says that, listen, you know what? The nation of Yashra'al will be as the sand of the sea. Okay, the sand of the sea as the stars of the heavens. But because of transgression now, the nation of Israel, her numbers would decrease, because the laws of America now teaches that you're not supposed to have second wives. You're not supposed to have concubines and handmaids and things like that. But what I found interesting now, when you look at other cultures, the reason why they continue to strive and prosper is because they're actually following the laws that was set up originally for you. And this is documented here in amongst the Moabites. Okay, amongst a lot of the African cultures and things like that. They understand these laws, but what's happening now is that we have a teaching now that's called replacement theology. Replacement theology is coming from the Christian church, where they say, listen, you know what? Those things that were done back in the Old Testament, they're done away with, and we can't do those things anymore. That's barbaric. How dare you do anything like that? And so now when you want to come back full center with the law, statutes, and commandments, it caused a lot of problems in the scripture. And brother Allah, I mean, we've been in this walk for a long time. I've seen relationships break apart. Break apart because a lot of people are hearers of the word, but not doers of the word. And that becomes a real issue in Israel. And again, brothers and sisters don't know how to love one another. They don't know how to get along. But at some point, we're going to have to get along. Two quick things. One of the things that I used to hear regarding Yabam or the Levirate marriage is that in regards to concubines and the right to continue, is that, well, I tell you what, I'm not going to receive that. I'm not going to do that. What's going to actually happen now is that when the Father comes, the Father's going to then pour out his set-apart spirit on me, and then I'll accept it. But if you get the whole thing about rehearsing the righteous acts. We're going to show in scripture now is that, again, rehearsing the righteous acts is so important now, is that if you don't get familiar with these practices now, the Father's not going to wave a magic wand over you and then all of a sudden you're going to accept these laws here. It's not going to happen like that. Another thing that I've been hearing is that when it comes time to write the ketubah, there are sisters who are telling their potential ishas, listen, you know what? This is what I need for you to put in the contract, that you won't take on a second isha. This is what they're asking. Now that's very dangerous because, like me and my Isha, we talk about, and I talk to other brothers and sisters, you don't know what the Father might have you to do in this walk. The format for marriage was already set up. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. What we need to do now is stop this whole thing about trying to compromise with the Father. Every single time when you read the scripture that we try to compromise with the Father, we find ourselves back into another captivity again. And then we say, listen, you know what? That the Father is not just. But when you go to the book of Ezekiel, the 18th chapter, 25th verse, the Father says, listen, you know what? Am my laws unjust, or is it that your laws are unjust? I gave you the rules and regulations of how this thing was set up that you have problems with it. And we do understand, and we do want to be patient with one another, understanding now is that this whole slave mentality that's been placed upon us by Western society, it is hard to get away with. It is hard. We want to hang on to it and hang on to it and hang on to it, but there's going to come a time where we're going to have to actually put these rules, laws, statutes, and commandments into effect. Now, listen, if this was a big thing with women, women understood this whole thing. Dying without a son to continue both his name and his life was considered by Hebrews a tragedy. A brother or a cousin could inherit a deceased property only by marrying his widow and offering a chance to produce a son with genes. Genes close as possible to those of her father. We had talked about before the importance of genes and genetics. All right, that is so, so important. We talked about the Hebrew alphabet. We talked about how that is actually talking about the human genome. We talked about another Hebrew letter here, which is very important, which is, it makes the glottal sound of ka. All right, it's a glottal sound. And this symbol right here is so important. Okay, the ACHG, when we talk about the human genome, and we're going to find out, all right, that when we're talking about bloodline marriages, when we talk about the laws of succession, it is very important that we understand exactly what's going on here, because that was an absolute no-no in Scripture for a woman not to have any children. No, women were very adamant about that. No, I'm not even going for that. And we see that situation happening with Sarah. Now, monogamy was the idea, but polygyny or polygamy now was acceptable. Thus, a prior marriage was not a hindrance, but the kinsman would need both the resources and the desires to support a new wife. We're almost done here. It is not the misfortune of a woman forced into marriage with a man who could have been a stranger. Let me read it again. It is not the misfortune of a woman forced into marriage with a man who could have been a stranger. It was the widow who initiated the proceeding, not the kinsman. We're going to show that in the scripture. Let me say it again. It was the widow who initiated the proceeding, not the kinsman, and the marriage not only gave her the opportunity to have children, but also meant food, clothing, and shelter that might otherwise have been hard to find. We're going to go to the book of Ecclesiasticus in the Apocrypha, the 7th chapter, verse 24. We're going to start breaking some of this stuff down here. At some point, application is going to have to be applied. As much as these people draw near to me with their mouths, but their heart is far from me. You know, these are the things that the scriptures are saying. So there should be no issues with me. Okay, if anybody has an issue, it would be with the Father. Because he's some. 7:24. Actually, I'm going to start with 20:23. And that's one of the reasons why, too, last week I gave out the Shema. And I pray that brothers and sisters were able to go over that and see the importance of the Shema. And like Brother Eliyahu, he hit it right on the head. That, and even my brother here, he even talked about the first commandment was to listen. Israel doesn't like, we don't like to listen. But it says now, verse 23, hast thou children? If thou hast children, instruct them and bow down their neck from their youth. Bow down their necks from their youth. Then it says in verse 24, hast thou daughters? All right, hast thou daughters? have care of their bodies, and show not thyself cheerful towards them. Marry thy daughters, and so shalt thou have performed a weighty matter. But give her not to a man, but give her to a man of understanding. So it is very important, again, just like you brought out earlier now, those of us that have daughters, all right, when we begin to look at the laws of marriage, the laws of marriage work this way, where it was very important now, when the whole marriage process started, that you gave your daughters to men of understanding. Because you wanted to make sure now that your daughters now was in a comfortable situation where the man was able to take care of her, he wasn't beating on her and all these other things. So again, it is very important now for marriage and children, all right, very important. Now we want to go to, we're going to stay in the same book. We're going to go to 22. Ecclesiasticus, we're still in the Apocrypha here, and we're going to go to we're going to read verses 4 and 5. We're talking about marriage here a little bit. Ecclesiasticus 22, verse 4 and 5. It says, now a wise daughter shall bring an inheritance to her husband. All right? This is scripture now. A wise daughter shall bring an inheritance to her husband. These are children. All right? But she that liveth dishonestly is her father's heaviness. So we see what happened here now. We're talking about now, again, we're reading. Let me do this. What just happened in verse 4? I'm going to read it again. A wise daughter shall bring an inheritance to her husband. But she that liveth dishonestly now is her father's heaviness.
So is it saying that if a woman is living dishonestly, that she would still be with her father's house and not being a gift to, as an isha to another household? That she would be still under her father's covering and not isha's covering?
Yeah, you're always there. You're always there. Yeah, because I'm not to start doing this. I'm not to start pointing out brothers. Hey, listen, you know what? I don't want you to say anything. But you're right. Yeah. You hit the target here. But watch this here now. But there's a little bit more to this now. When a man marries a woman, all right, and he's taken her from his father's house. A dishonest woman, even though she's married and she's now under her husband's covering, if the father has daughters, all right, and this woman is now living dishonestly, the father now that has other daughters, you're now bringing now shame on him because he has other daughters, and the other daughters also want to get married. So being that he's now, this new woman is under his covering, this would also now shame not just the husband, but also her father, because that was her last covering. So what happens now is that when we marry, you marry family, is what's happening here. You marry family. And what's happening here in Western society is that a lot of times we see that when family gets sick and everything like that, and we do understand now, if the situation gets unbearable, you have to put your parents and things like that in nursing homes, whatever the case like that might be. But culture had it like this in Hebrew. When your families got sick, you took care of your family.
There you go.
That's the way that happened. So we're just trying to show now the unity and what actually happens now in the marriage where you didn't just marry your isha. You brought two families together. Is what's happening. And so this now makes everybody responsible. So even though that this is your isha, you still have a responsibility, okay, because the father wrote out a contract with your father based upon all the things that you should do to keep the unit together. And the whole thing was about, from Genesis to Revelation, it was always about continuing. Seed. Always, from Genesis to Revelation. This is the reason why I say that we cannot, under no circumstances, all right, understanding what the law is about regarding the Levirate marriage, or the Hebrew word Yabam, is that you can't reinvent the wheel. regarding marriage. It's already laid out the way that it should be. And one more thing too, to show you how Western society has spoiled us. I like R&B, all right? I don't have a problem with R&B. I like it and everything like that. But it has its place. But I notice now, and I'm sure you do too, a lot of marriages now, when the bride is coming down the aisle and things like that, she's coming down to the songs like Luther Vandross and Keith Sweat and things like that.
Yeah.
So, but if you listen to the lyrics, they are not Torah-based at all. And this is what causes the problems in Hebrew marriages, because I find, and I believe, according to the scriptures now, if you love your Isha according to the scripture, I believe that the foundation is stronger. And the reason why I believe that, because the Father said this is the way that a marriage is supposed to actually happen from Jump Street in the beginning. Anything outside of that, you're going to run into problems. So a foundation has to be established in order for you to have a successful marriage. And then what happens now is that when you begin to now follow a Hebrew marriage as much as you can, there's been situations where, listen, you know what? He don't love me. Okay, because what's happening now is that you're now beginning to walk this Hebrew walk and not a Greco-Roman walk regarding marriage, because again, there's a difference between the two. Big difference. We was at 22:4 and 5, right? 22:4 and 5. It says now, a wise daughter shall bring an inheritance to her husband, but she that liveth dishonestly is her father's heaviness. She that is bold dishonoreth both her father and her husband, but they both shall despise her. So again, it is very important now for the fathers to marry the daughters. Very important. But make sure that you marry them to men of understanding. Because again, the right seed, righteousness, must continue. It must continue. All right? Read on a little bit here. We're going to get into it real heavy here. Now, the widow first had to claim her right to what is called a Levirate marriage. There was, of course, an order of precedence with the oldest brother of the deceased first in line. All right? Everybody understands that, right? But read it again. The widow first had to claim her right to what was called a Levirate marriage. That was, of course, an order of precedence with the oldest brother of the deceased first in line. If he refused, then the second brother could accept. Then came the opportunity of other male relatives in their turn. She made the decision to marry, but then had to accept the first man on the list who said yes. Now, in the book of Ruth, the 3rd chapter, verse 7, we're going to read that. It says, following the instructions of her mother-in-law Ruth, following the instructions of her mother-in-law Naomi, Ruth went to the threshing room where Boaz had fallen asleep. All right? She turned back the blanket at his feet and lay down at his feet. This was how a widow claimed her right to a Levirate marriage. When Boaz awoke, he praised Ruth's devotion to Naomi and agreed to act on her behalf. Now we're going to go to the book of Ruth and look at that a little bit closer, so we can have a nice little understanding on what happened last week regarding that whole right here, 3 and 7. And when Boaz had eaten and drunken, and his heart was merry, he went to lie down at the end of the heap of corn. And she came softly and uncovered his feet and she laid herself down there. Now, again, everything in Hebrew means something. I know he already knows what it is. I don't want Warrior Eliyahu to say anything. I don't want Brother Yaakov to say anything. When Ruth here uncovers the feet of Boaz here, what does that mean? Okay, we're talking about seed here. What does that mean? I already gave you a nice little clue. He ate, he was full, okay? This is a particular harvest season here, and he's asleep. She uncovers his feet, and she lays down underneath his feet. Right? Remember when we were young, when I'm talking about the males here now. When we were young, and our father, the shoes would be like at the end of the couch or whatever the case might be, and we would put our feet in his shoes, and we would walk around the house in our father's shoes. And so we know that that was actually a symbol that at some point you would have to fill your father's shoes. Okay? And with that is that you're saying now that you will continue the walk that he started. And the walk that your father started now was having a progenitor, seed, children. We have a situation here now where where Ruth now, she uncovers his feet. Brother Eliyahu had brought it out a couple of weeks ago, how covenants are made. We had a situation with Abraham looking to marry off his son Isaac. All right, he made his servant Eliezer here now to put his hands underneath his thigh. All right, we talked about now that the thigh doesn't actually mean that the thigh, but the thigh actually meant now the reproductive organs of the man, the testes, the testicles here. And because of that now, this is where seed comes from. All right, and this is where it gets real important now. I'll write this down here. Genes is so important. I talked about this before, and I'm not going to go too far into it, is where this is going to be very important. That XY chromosome and this XX chromosome. I have two sisters here that are nurses, Maisha and my sister here. She can verify some of these things here. This XY chromosome is male. The XX chromosome, everybody knows, is female. We have a situation here now with these chromosomes here. You see now that the male consists of an XY chromosome, which makes them dual in nature. We have the female chromosome, which is a double X. All right? And so now the benefits of what's going on here now is that this male now with an XY chromosome, when he releases his germ or his genetic material inside of the woman, if this X matches with the sister's X, a double X, you're going to have the birth of a girl. If the Y chromosome matches with the female's X chromosome, you now have the XY chromosome, which gives you now the reproduction of a male child here. So what's actually happening here now is that Ruth wants to continue. That's all it's about. She wants to continue. And I don't believe that there's a woman in here that doesn't want to continue. She's a widow. She still can produce children. And this is how she's able to survive, because we're talking about an inheritance. The way that you continue is through your children and through an inheritance. If you don't have these things, you're considered poor. It's going to be very, very difficult for you to live. Everybody receives an inheritance. All right? So I just wanted to make sure that we understood that. So again, when she uncovers his feet now, what she's actually saying now is that she'll be submissive to him, and she wants to now carry his seed. She wants to continue because her husband died. And when we began to read the story of, in the book of Ruth now, Naomi she said something real important. She said, listen, you know what, I'm an old woman now, and she made the statement that the father had struck in her. She lost her husband, her two sons, and she's now at that age where she can't produce any more children. But the way that Naomi continues to live, she's going to now live through Ruth, because Boaz now, who will be next to them. Actually, there's somebody who was before Boaz, but what happens now is that Boaz would be the next of kin, because the first one didn't want to take on Ruth as a wife. And so now again, Ruth wants to live, Naomi wants to live, the next of kinsman is Boaz, and so this is how the whole family unit continues to grow. Everybody has to continue. All right? 3 and 7 again. And when Boaz had eaten and drunken and his heart was merry, he went to lie down again, and at the end of the heap of corn, and she came softly and uncovered his feet and laid down beside him underneath his feet. All right, I just wanted to bring that out. Now in chapter 4, verse 1, we have Boaz now. He goes into the city. And this is where my sister Nina, I keep forgetting your Hebrew name, all right? I like to call everybody by their Hebrew names. But anyway, Boaz now, he went into the city. As it tells us in the book of Ruth, the 4th chapter, verse 1, he goes into the city where important business was conducted, and he called 10 elders of the town to sit with him as a witness. All right, something's about to happen here. Then when the man who was actually the closest kin and the first in line to inherit passed by, Boaz called him over and in the presence of the elders reminded him of the Levirate rule and asked if he wished to inherit both Ruth and the land belonging to her deceased husband. The kinsman declined and handed one of his sandals to Boaz, all right? And that's basically how we have the whole story there. But now, with men, all right, I'm talking about the men here now. In a situation now, even though you're married now, if your brother, your biological brother, was to pass away, all right, and he didn't have any children, you were next in line, okay, to bring up children for your brother. And this is the reason why I brought out last week this Hebrew word here. And a lot of times I write these words down so that on your free time, you can look at these words. So as I go on to next week's class, it shouldn't be a problem. What caused a little stir last week was this Hebrew word right here, ga'al. The word ga'al means to redeem. And I talked about the call stem system for about 3 weeks in a row, okay, in the Nafal system. What happens now is that in the call stem system of this word right here, redeem, it's said now where it talks about where a brother redeems his dead brother in order to bring up seed. All right, and that's what they've got a little. I believe they've got a little complicated there. All right, so we just want to make sure that everybody has a good understanding of that. Now,
I got a quick
sure.
question. Now, being that you know we're here, right?
Right.
And a lot of us, well, we do, but a lot of our family members don't have the knowledge of who we are, right? Now, we know that Scripture talks about giving your seed to another nation, and so forth and so forth.
Right.
Now, let's just say I have a brother who doesn't really take to this walk, and he dies, and he has a woman of another nation, right? Or, and then let's also take when it says your brother. Can that also mean your brothers in this walk?
We're gonna get to that.
Instead of just being, oh, you're biological, what about somebody else in this walk?
We're going to get to that. We're going to get to that. The next word that we want to look at here, all right, is this word here. It's going to be very important. Look it up when you have the time. E-N-D-O-G-A-M-Y. Endogamy. All right, endogamy. This is also a Hebrew practice, all right, endogamy. Endogamy now is the practice of tribal groups' marriage to members of the group. Again, it's the practice of tribal groups' marriage to members of the group and prohibiting marriages outside of the group. This practice of marriage is most common amongst aristocrats and ruling classes. What I found very interesting about this definition is that the word aristocrats and ruling class, this was the position of the nation of Yashra'al, because it tells you in the book of Deuteronomy, the 7th chapter, the 6th verse, now is that we're supposed to be a nation of priests. All right, and so rules and regulations regarding marriage was put into place. And again, endogamy is the practice of tribal groups' marriage to members of the group and prohibiting marriages outside of the group. That's going to be very important. As we try to build a body here, obviously our mothers and fathers and things like that, you know, they're not following this walk here. So what do we now do in a situation where if a brother that's, hypothetically, if he was in the walk, he's in the walk now here, and he dies and Isha doesn't have any children. When certain situations come up and it's not detailed how we handle it in the Scripture, What we do now is that we go to elders. All right, we have elders. It was a ruling body where we get together and we made sure, according to the scriptures, through fasting and through prayer, that we gave the best answers regarding these particular situations here. Now we have another definition here. I mean, word here is called is exogamy, exogamy. All right, this here is talking about marriage outside of a specific tribe or a similar social unit. So with this one here, you can pretty much marry wherever it is that you want to marry. All right, you can do whatever it is that you want to do, but here is a more structured form of marriage. And here in Western society, both men and women, they seem to want to do this one right here. They want to do whatever it is that they want to do and just marry whoever it is that they want to marry. But according to the scriptures, we're going to find out that that's not the way that we do things here. We're going to go now to the book of Numbers, Bamidbar. And we're going to clear up some things that's going to make everything a whole lot more easier. 30, 27. 27, all right? Let me get it here. I'm doing okay, but Tom, Mikey?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
You said Numbers 30 or 27?
We're going to the book of Numbers, the 36th chapter. All right, the 36th chapter. Numbers 36. Okay, I'm going to be reading from the Britain's Greek Septuagint, all right? I like reading from the Septuagint because it's a lot more accurate than the King James Version, all right? Verse 1, and the chief of fathers of the families of the children of Gilead. This is very powerful, all right? And the chief of the fathers of the families of the children of Gilead, the son of Machir, the son of Manasseh, of the families of the sons of Joseph, came near and spoke before Moshe and before the princes. And spoke before Moshe and before the princes, the chief fathers of the children of Yashra'al. And they said, Yahuwah commanded my master to give the land for an inheritance by lot to the children of Yashra'al. What are we talking about here? We're talking about an inheritance. And my sovereign was commanded by Yahuwah to give the inheritance of Zelophehad, our brother, and to his daughters. All right? Daughters here. And if they be married, watch this now, if they be married to any of the sons of the other tribes of the children of Yashra'al, then shall their inheritance be taken from the inheritance of our fathers, and shall be put into the inheritance of the tribe whereunto they are received, so shall it be taken from the lot of our inheritance. Everybody know what's going on here? We have a situation now where there are daughters, all right? They were promised land, an inheritance. The father is dead, and they want to know now what's going to happen to these daughters here. And we're talking about now that these particular daughters now need to marry a certain way, because the Jubilee is also important. All right? Now, and if they marry to any of the sons of the other tribes of the nation of Yashra'al, then shall the inheritance be taken from the inheritance of our fathers, and should be put to the inheritance of the tribe whereunto they are received, so that should be taken from the lot of our inheritance. And when the jubilee of the children of Yashra'al shall be, then shall their inheritance be put into the inheritance of the tribe hereunto. They are received. So shall their inheritance be taken away from the inheritance of the tribe of our fathers. Now this is a problem. Listen to now how Moshe is going to handle this problem here under the tutorship of the father of Yahuwah. And Moshe commanded the children of Yashra'al according to the words of Yahuwah. And again now, these are the words of Yahuwah, saying, the tribes of the sons of Yehusaph and Joseph has said, well, this is the thing which Yahuwah doeth command. All right? Which Yahuwah doeth command. Concerning the daughters of Zelophehad, saying, let them marry now, these daughters now, in order for them to get this inheritance, let them marry to whom they think best. Only to the family of the tribe of their father shall they marry. Okay? That's how they're supposed to marry. So shall not the inheritance of the children of Israel remove from tribe to tribe. For every one of the children of Israel shall keep himself to the inheritance of his fathers. And every daughter that possesseth an inheritance in any tribe, again, any tribe of the children of Yashra'al shall be wife unto one of the family of the tribe of her father, that the children of Yashra'al may enjoy every man the inheritance of his fathers. Verse 9. Neither shall the inheritance remove from one tribe to another tribe, but every one of the tribe of the children of Yashra'al shall keep himself to his own inheritance. Verse 10. Again, this is what the Father commanded. Even as Yahuwah commanded Moshe, so did the daughters of Zelophehad did. So we're going to talk about some of the heads now. For Mahalah, Tirzah, Haglah, Milcah, Noah, the daughters of Zelophehad were married unto their father, brothers, sons. So when we begin to talk about now this Levirate law of marriage now, this is what's happening. Because for the most part, what happens now is that a lot of women and men will say, ooh, that's nasty. I would never do that. How can I do that? But in order for you now to continue the lineage, the bloodline, continue with the inheritance, because you were allotted land. All right? But you can't take hold of the land because of the importance of the male seed. In order for you now to get this inheritance, this is what you have to do. Your father has passed away. Your responsibility now is to marry your father's brother's children, which makes that now your cousins.
That's right. They do that now.
Yeah, this is the way that the bloodline stayed intact. The reason why, if you notice, sometimes when there might be issues with pregnancies and children coming out kind of off a little bit, you know, because the scripture did say in the last days that menstruous women should bring forth monsters. Right? But the only reason why a menstruous woman can bring forth monsters is because it has to be what type of man that she's dealing with, because she can't get pregnant by herself. This is the reason why we tell women all the time that you should be very careful who you're intimate with. I talked about last week. Just because a man has on a kufi and a tunic and he knows a couple of Bible scriptures, that means absolutely nothing. You have to make sure that we understand, and I'm not going to go too far into this, but there's so much with the Hebrew, and I was told to listen,